So, I'm gonna pop on here for a little bit to talk about the next death practice group, which is Wednesday, December 14th. And I have a little announcement too for January, but I'll get to that a little bit later. So, non-conceptual practice, sometimes called non-conceptual meditation, is very misunderstood in the West. It's almost like a kind of impossible reality. And so for the past few years, I've been trying to make it more understandable, thinking about it in different ways, and it really fits into kind of improvisation, but not just doing things. But the play aspect is very important. That we're trying to play non-duality or non-dual liberation. We're not trying to gain or have non-dual liberation. And this is, I think, one of the biggest misconceptions already, because our language and the way that we describe things is very goal and individual oriented, identity oriented. And the non-dual liberation is not about having a stronger identity. It's about blurring the boundaries between your perceptual biases and the things you think are true, the narratives that you generate, the narratives that your culture tells you are true and false. And so it can destabilize people who are already sort of wanting to be destabilized, in the sense that they're angry, they're resentful, they're mad, they feel betrayed. So when you already believe these things and you already have these emotions you believe are true, based on fate patterns, based on personal history, based on ancestral history, then when you do non-conceptual meditation, it feels like someone's pulling the rug out from under you and you won't be able to get what you want. And this is the big issue. Because in this culture, religion and spirituality is still about getting what you want. It's still a capitalism game. It's a colonial narrative about taking and getting what you want, so you can win this kind of survival of the fittest competition that you think the universe actually is. And so if you still secretly believe all those things, even if you pretend to be, namaste bae, or it's all unity, bro. Even if you pretend to be like that, the reality underneath is that you're going to have to deal with things that you're afraid of, including pain, and then the desire part, which is the hunger, things that you want that you're going to be really mad if you don't get. So that's why I spent 6 months talking about conceptual practices, because conceptual practices is kind of like a re-narrative practice where you can rewrite your stupid history, your stupid narrative that you believe in, your stupid identities that are fake. You can make better ones. So if you haven't made a better identity yet, then you're going to have a really hard time with non-conceptual practice, because non-conceptual practice is asking you to take that better identity and put it to the side. And if you don't have a better identity yet, and you haven't felt the good feelings from the better identity, you're not going to want to put it aside, because the shitty identity that you already have is the only thing you've got. And this is the big problem. So there's a kind of replacement model of addiction going on here, which is first do a bunch of imagination, do a bunch of dream practice, do a bunch of re-narrative practice for yourself, practice loving kindness and compassion. And then, once you feel that, you're not going to care so much about your fake-ass identities. You're not going to care so much. If someone asks you to put them to the side, you might actually be able to do it for a little bit of time. You might actually be able to go, oh, right, I'm really tired of being a human with this name and these identity markers that don't fucking make any goddamn sense. I'm actually going to go into non-conceptual practice, where I am going to practice being, not being my identities, not being the stories, but just, being form, being this experiential node in the network, whatever, So I'm going to go over this little thing I wrote, and I'm going to explain it, and this will be like a little lecture, and I'm sorry if there's noise in the background. That's just the way it is. I'm outside. So I wrote a little thing called Why Non-Conceptual Practice, because I think people need to, they need to have a fucking reason, and most people can't imagine the better reason. So another way to say this is that the totality of reality, which is life and death combined, which is not life and death versus each other as polar opposites, but life and death combined, which means that life and death are not what we think they are, but they're a kind of different, it's a kind of totality of experience, of materiality and immateriality. So this non-competing totality of reality, first we have to understand that it's non-dual. It's not competing with itself. It's not polarized. It's not any of this nonsense. And we have to understand that totality is a dream. It's dream-like. So we can say it's dream, which is really what you want to do, but you can also say it's dream-like. And this is how it's dream-like. It's like dreams are filled with appearances that appear to have meaning, which is symbol, right? So symbol. So dreams are filled with appearances. I'm an appearance that seems to be symbolic. The color pink on my glasses is a symbol for something for you. I don't know. And, the way that I talk, it has a kind of symbolic meaning or something. I don't know. But everyone can, take whatever they want from it. But in an instant in the dream, the appearances change, and therefore the meanings also change. So we all know this. In a dream, we're walking down a hallway, and suddenly we're at the beach. And the hallway meant one thing, and the beach is another meaning. It's a symbolic meaning set. Did you really leave the hallway ever? Did you really leave the beach? Fucking probably not, but it appears like you leave the beach, because we're so visually biased creatures. We believe what we see. Okay? So the totality of reality is this kind of dreamlike nature where appearances arise and then change and dissolve. And it keeps happening over and over and over again. It doesn't stop. It's kind of like the ocean, wave after wave after wave. It just keeps happening. Like you keep breathing, it keeps happening. Whether you really like it or not, it's going to keep happening. So in an instant, those appearances and their associated meanings change, and each appearance or form is essentially a concept, but not a singular concept, a cloud of concepts, like a constellation of symbol meaning concepts. Okay, so I'm a concept cloud, just like everything else is, but only to the eye of the perceiver. So you're perceiving me and all that I'm doing as a cloud of associated concepts, symbols, and network meanings. But a squirrel would look at me and see a totally different set of meanings, right? But I'm still the same. But the beholder, the perceiver, is interpreting my symbols differently, which is to say my size, my shape, my colors, the speed of my movements, the tone of my voice, all that stuff. Okay? So these associated symbol clouds, we could say that they nascently enact behaviors. So they are primers. They prime something in the system to in a relational behavioral way. They say, okay, so if these meanings are what's happening, what needs to happen in the system? And that includes primal reactions like fight, flight, freeze, etc., but without those names attached to them. So we could call it approach and avoid mechanisms inside the nervous system. But they prime behaviors. And we see this in animals. And there's entire studies based on why predator animals chase prey animals in certain ways. And it has to do with like curvatures and sharp edges and all sorts of wacky things, but we get this immediately. If you were walking down the street and you saw a bunch of sharp objects on the ground, what would you do? You would stop and you would back away. But if you were walking down the street and you saw a bunch of soft and fluffy and beautiful objects that seemed enticing, what would you do? You would kind of lean in a little bit, right? So that's all I'm saying when I say they nascently enact relationships and behaviors. They prime the system for like, is that dangerous or is that comforting and nourishing? Okay. But remember, this is all forms and appearances that will change. So if in your dream you see a tiger, you're going to back away, and then suddenly that tiger becomes a pillow or a castle full of pillows, suddenly you want to jump into it. Or it becomes a stuffed tiger. Suddenly you want to hug the stuffed tiger. But if the tiger was a real tiger, you would back away. All in the dream, which is life. Okay? So if you only practice conceptual practices, like analyzing, visualizing, imagining, narrating, so those are all conceptual practices: understanding, analyzing, dissecting. The scientific method is largely a kind of reductionistic conceptual praxis, in the West at least. And what I'm trying to tell you is that there's a whole kind of science that is not about that. But the first part, we just go, if I'm always trying to analyze or visualize or create new forms, then I'm chasing symbols. I'm sort of chasing symbols as they change. Oh, it's a tiger. I don't want it to be a tiger. I want it to be a pillowcase. A pillow. Okay, now it's a pillow. Okay, now what is that? Now I'm feeling a feeling. Okay, now what's that feeling remind me of? Oh, and you'll notice that in a lot of somatic therapy, this is what you do. Well, what's that image feel like in your body? Oh, it feels like this warm thing. Oh, what's that warm thing like in your body? Oh, I'm reminded of this memory from my childhood. Now I'm getting really sad. Oh, okay, where's the sadness in your body? It's just like chasing symbols and through the system, right? That's conceptual practice. What's this mean? Oh, it means that I feel good. Okay. Now what's that mean? Oh, now I don't like that. That feels bad. It's a very conceptual practice. You're chasing meanings and symbols, and you're creating a story by chasing the meanings and symbols, right? So you're stringing together a narrative based on these symbolic forms and appearances. Stringing together. Well, if that happened and that happened and that happened, what does that mean together? And you get a gestalt or a constellation, right? So I'm just kind of deconstructing all the fucking forms of therapy right now. But I'm just saying they can all be called conceptual practices on some level. Because you're using your mind, you're thinking about things, you're contemplating, you're analyzing, you're reflecting, you're kind of going, oh, what's this mean? What's this mean? What's this mean for my decision-making process? How do I make a better decision so I can have a better life? Right? That's all conceptual practice, and it's totally fine. We need that. But I'm trying to bring us to this other place that's not about that. So when you start to practice non-conceptual practice, you practice being in the dream, which is to say, you're in a dream, no matter where you appear to be. You go, oh, I'm in a dream. I'm in a dream now, and I'm in a dream now, and I'm in a dream now, and I'm in a dream now. Okay? You're just constantly saying, oh, look at this dream. Oh, look at this dream. Oh, here's another dream happening. I'm driving down the street. Here's another dream. Okay? But you're not like drunk on the dream. You're just like, this is a dream, okay. But you go beyond the constant chasing. You start to go beyond the thinking things and the thinging things. And what that means is you start to go, what if I didn't just label everything I saw? What if I stopped just trying to say, oh, that's what that is, and that's what that is, and that's what that means, and that's what that means, and that's what that means, right? You're trying to loosen up the boundaries on this kind of constant predictive processing thing that your brain is trying to do to keep you safe. Well, that's safe and that's dangerous, and that's safe and that's dangerous, and oh, I don't know about that. That seems weird, unfamiliar. That means I'm going to put it in the dangerous bin. That's what the system is doing all the time. So you're noticing that, and you're going, well, what if I could ease up on it? What if that wasn't dangerous and that wasn't safe? But it didn't mean the opposite. It just means I don't know. Okay? We're going into I don't know as play. So the play part is very important. So we practice being in the dream in ways that are not problematic, but instead playful. So we switch from a problem mindset to a play mindset. And we switch from a meaning mindset to a relational mindset. So instead of constantly going, well, what did that mean? What did that mean? Well, they said that in this tone of voice. What did that mean? Well, what does this mean? You go, I don't know what it means, but how is it relational? How does it make me feel relationally? Not necessarily what it means, but just like, I want to pause, I want to move closer, I want to, whatever. You just start to go into a relational model instead of a meaning-making model, okay? And instead of being anthropocentric, which is to say human-biased, as if human thought and human behavior was the peak of reality, you start to become more elemental. And elemental can mean a lot of things, but I'm really talking about like the primary building blocks of reality, which in a lot of cultures break down into 4 or 5 or 6 elements. So in Tibetan, it's space, air, earth, water, fire. Right? It's those 5. The point being is that they go from like more empty and immaterial to more material, right? But they're basic. It's like they're basic. So whatever model you choose to use, that's the model you're going to use. Instead of the model of, well, what does this mean in human terms? You're going to start to go, well, how is this elementally? Okay. Is this more like space? Is it more like fire? Is it more like water? Is it more like air and breath? Right? So you have to start to loosen the sort of hyperfixation on human complication about politics and religion and philosophy and stuff. You just have to go away from it. And you have to go, well, what seems to be happening? Oh, it seems like fire is happening, or maybe there's some water over here, and there's space over here, and there's air over here. Okay, you start to get more into the elemental rather than the human or the anthropocentric qualities. So I'll talk a little bit about how we can metaphorize, how we can use a metaphor to understand this conceptual, non-conceptual bridge or totality. So if we look at the moon, we know that the moon reflects light from the sun, but we can only see one side of it, and that's the side that we might consider to be conceptual practice, is that there is light bouncing off of something and we see it and we create some kind of meaning based on that. Oh, the moon is full. Now it's a full moon. And what does that mean? It means that we can see better in the dark. And so we have a bunch of meanings based on that from our deep ancestry. And then when the moon is new and it's dark, that's a different meaning. Oh, the moon has disappeared and now we have to really protect ourselves from big lions and tigers, So this is all in our DNA, right? So we're constantly waiting for this feedback loop to happen, which is, where is the light bouncing off of the mirror and what does it show us? And how does that affect our behaviors. And that's all conceptual practice. How do I behave now based on what's happening in my environment? Right. But we could, if we're really going for liberation, non-dual liberation, we have to understand, we know there's a side of the moon that we can't see. We call it the dark side of the moon. And we know that there's a side of a mirror that we can't see either. It's the backside of a mirror. How else are you going to have a mirror? Right? It gets weirder when we look in the water because the water doesn't have a back or a front side. So we see reflection in the water, but there's no back of the water. So this is what I mean when I say I'm sort of baby stepping the metaphors, because at a certain point, reflection happens regardless of the light that bounces off of anything. And this is what non-conceptual practice shows us. It's very, very strange at the beginning, but it's quite peaceful and liberating at a certain point. And it has everything to do with the death and dying process, which is what I'm going to talk about on Wednesday, the 14th in the class. I'm going to go through all the Bardo realms and go through all the death practices, and they're going to be based on what I'm talking about here, which is this dark side of the mirror, light side of the mirror. Seeming duality is not dual, but it just seems that way for the sake of telling a story to our childlike brains. So the dark side of the mirror, which supports the capacity for reflection to happen. So it's the stabilizing force, because the reflection isn't stable. The reflection keeps changing. The appearances in the mirror keep changing depending on what walks in front of the mirror. It's not stable. And yet, the mirror itself is completely and totally always stable. But the appearances, the reflections that come out of the mirror, they're not stable. And if we keep chasing them, we have this monkey mind that thinks we know more and more things, but we're missing something by doing that. And that's all I'm saying, is that chasing the reflections in the mirror is one part of practice, but it's not all of practice. It's not all of non-dual practice. It's just part of it. And so we start to try to become more like the side of the mirror that just supports the capacity for reflection to occur without necessarily caring so much about what is reflected. Okay, it's very important to understand that. This dark side of the moon thing doesn't really have opinions about the light side reality, the light side appearance, the light side transformation. It doesn't really care if the moon is waxing or waning or full or empty or new. The dark side of the moon is the dark side of the moon forever. It's forever. It's the same thing forever. It has no opinions. It just supports the capacity for this thing to happen that we then go, oh, look at this crazy thing that's happening, right? So in non-dual practice, in non-conceptual practice, we're trying to become more like this constant, stable darkness that just supports the capacity for reflection, but doesn't necessarily chase reflections around. It doesn't go, oh, come back. I liked that reflection in the mirror. I want you to come back. No, it doesn't care. It's like whatever, clouds passing in the sky. It doesn't matter. The clouds do not disrupt the sky. The sky is endless. So the dark side of the moon would be like a dark side of the mirror. That's what we're talking about. And a dark mirror has a lot of interesting properties because we can't bias our eyes as much. And when we can't bias our eyes as much, we start to understand how fickle our perception actually is. And anyone who's done any dark retreat practice or dark room practice or dark eye open meditation, whether in a dark room or eyes open behind a certain kind of mask, your eyes are open, but no light is getting in. And when no light gets in for a certain amount of time, you start to hallucinate. You start to stop being able to figure out what is so-called real and what is so-called fake, because you start to understand something about the dreaming nature of reality, is that you're always dreaming whether you're awake or asleep. It's the same thing. Your mind, the light in your eyes, is trying to create images and appearances on some level. And it's kind of addicted to it because it wants to see things in order to know how to feel. How should I feel? Well, let me look around. And a lot of somatic practice at the very beginning is about this retraining of the body to find visual images in the world that feel good so that you can reduce your anxiety and depression. That's like the first stage, and a lot of people stay in that for like 30, 40 years because they're so attached to a certain way things are supposed to look in order for how they feel to be real. A non-conceptual practice is trying to say, let's go further than that. What if you could feel whatever you want to feel, however things looked or didn't look? And then let's go beyond even that, where we don't really care about how we fucking feel and we still behave according to the situation at hand, right? And this is very hard for a lot of people because the two things that they're mostly making decisions, how do people make decisions in this society? One is based on appearances. We can see it. Sexism, racism, those are decision-making processes based on appearance. And they have faulty narratives attached to them. So make choices based on appearances. That's one way people do it. The second way people do it is to make choices based on how they feel, emotions.
Shopping, you better hit it quick before it freezes again.
Yeah. You have to understand that the emotions are kind of like this play of light and shadow in the dreaming, where like you can just feel however all the time. There's no real there. But you want to believe it. And everyone wants to believe it. I feel bad right now. Okay, what does that mean? I don't know, I just feel bad. I feel sad, I feel mad, I feel depressed, I feel traumatized, I feel victimized, I feel oppressed. These are all just code words for like, I don't like how I feel. And at a certain point, you need to get over that. But you need to have another practice to fall back on because your system isn't going to let you be like, oh, well, the only way I know how to make choices is how things look, how they appear, and how I feel. And then some people do this third thing. I think a lot of people do this third thing, but it's a little bit masked. It's what story do I believe is true about the world? And that's the third way of making decisions in this kind of regular dualistic world, is that you go, oh, well, I have this narrative about Jesus Christ, so now I know how things work and that's how I make decisions. So non-dual practice is saying those three are insufficient for liberation. Those three ways of making choices are insufficient. They're not like completely off the table. We're not going to say that we're not going to use them. We're just going to say they're insufficient and they're incomplete. They're incomplete modes of communication. Let's just say they're incomplete relational modes, but they're very useful if they're in a complete wholeness, right? If they're complete, then you can sometimes look at appearances and have feelings and stories, and that's fine. But there's this whole other pathway which is not about any of that, and it's very hard for Westerners, and it's very difficult to explain to other people. So that's why I have to do all this education stuff, because even the non-dual stuff from other cultures, its descriptions are based in those cultural forms. So we can use some of it, but then we also have to transfer the way of describing and explaining to our culture, right? And that's partly what I'm trying to do, is to try to make this less mysterious, even though on some level it will always be mysterious. But if it's too mysterious, people won't think it's an option, and they'll also go to gurus that they don't need to deal with, because they think that the guru has some special information for them that they can't get. And this is a big problem because it just fosters codependency and narcissism and parasocial relationships, right? Because a lot of people will say, Dare, you can't do any of this stuff unless you get a transmission from a guru or a lama. And it's like, no, the transmission is helpful, but you don't need the transmission. And this is heretical to a lot of people. Well, you definitely need the transmission. I'm like, no, you don't actually need the transmission. The transmission might speed things up for you, but it also might derail you because we don't really know how your fate pattern is in relationship to the other person's fate pattern. We don't really know if there's hidden codependency needs or parasocial engagement patterns or narcissistic vampire patterns. We don't really know. So I'm just telling you, you don't actually need that stuff. You could play instead. You could play non-dual liberation, and you could really have a truly kind of scientific spiritual process by which you could understand the various aspects of liberation and perception and reality and dream without necessarily having to lose your energy through some kind of weird relational paradigm that would then cause you to sort of learn things the hard way, right? So you could learn things in a different way that wasn't just ping-ponging through material conditions trying to find a new mommy or daddy or a new lover to save you from reality, because there is no reality to save you from on some level. And this is where it gets into death practice, and what I'm going to talk about on Wednesday the 14th is that I'm priming people to play practice inside of the dying process, which is happening right now, and it's also happening every night when we go to sleep. So if we understand that there's no death that's out there, somewhere over there, like an event that's going to happen someday, we actually go, the event is always happening. And we understand something about this dark side of the mirror, which is the capacity for darkness to support for reflection itself. And we understand something about how we chase meanings. Suddenly we have the ability to go imagine something different and practice play that different something, right? We practice play this thing that other people call stillness or meditation or whatever. Samadhi, Satori, Zen, Shamatha, it doesn't really matter what you call it, because you can then invent games, play, you can invent new plays of liberation wherever you are. As a culture, I want us to be able to do that, but we don't have a shared language yet. So I'm trying to develop this shared language so people understand what it means to kind of go through their pain, fear, and hunger without trying to solve it, but to go through it as a wisdom gate, and then have a death practice that is essentially about playing. It's not more morbid death practice. It's not like, oh no, I need to defeat all these ghosts so I don't go to hell when I die. But part of the play might be to address that. But ultimately, it's not really about any of that. You're trying to get to this playful, relational, elemental mode of being that understands the difference between just chasing concepts and generating concepts all the time in order to feel safe, to something that's different than that, right? And it's pretty science mystical on some level. I think it's very science fiction. I think it's very speculative fiction. It's very like you're in a dream all the time. And if you learn to be in a dream all the time, the options become very open. The options of your behaviors and the way that you interpret and the way that you experience things in your body become extremely open and permissive for different ways: novelty, sanity, peace, harm reduction. All of this stuff becomes very possible if we can do something that would be considered entering the unseen. Entering the unseen. And we enter the unseen like that, as if the image is kind of like a raindrop falling into a lake, and like no splash. So the entering the unseen is this seamless quality of water becoming water again, but like little water becoming big water. Entering the unseen is like that. And we can learn to enter the unseen right now, wherever we are. But we kind of need a lot of buffering, which is why I do all this talking and all this front loading of different concepts, because you kind of need a narrative that tells you what is entering the unseen like in a good way, right? And entering the unseen is a kind of dying process, but it's not morbid. It's not like suicide on some level. On another level, it is like suicide, but you don't want to tell anyone around you because they have crazy ideas about what that means. But for the adept practitioner, when you practice death practice, it is like that. You can kill your identity. It might come back because you're attached to it, but at least at the very least, you understand you can get to a cleaner baseline that is about darkness and empty space that holds anything without being attached to it, and then maybe remake your identity in a better way that has less baggage and less addictions and less narcissism and just less ignorance, confusion, ignorance, right? You're still going to have desires, hungers, preferences, but hopefully the pull that they have on your system will be less and less, so that you can just feel okay with more and more things that are happening, right? And honestly, the point, on some level, if there's a carrot, the carrot is you could feel okay more often. You don't necessarily have to feel bad just because of appearances or sickness or whatever. I mean, like, these are intense things I'm talking about, and it might seem magical, like magical thinking or wishful thinking. Oh, I do feel bad. I really am oppressed. There really is injustice in the world. Yeah, there is fucking injustice in the world. But you would be surprised at the amount of agency you actually have inside your dream system to not feel so enslaved all the time by the injustices that other people are doing. Most people, I don't know who talks about this stuff like this, but, I'm not trying to strengthen your identity. I'm trying to get your identity to a place where you can be playful with your identity and sometimes kill it in the moment, so that you can actually have real intimacy with reality. And maybe even with other human beings who can also do it. Because I can just tell you from personal experience, this identity strengthening, belief strengthening, opinion strengthening nonsense that's going on, it's you can't really play in that environment. There's no room for play because all that shit is too rigid. It's too rigid, it's too fixed. So that's my talk for today. I'm going to do a little announcement stuff now. So, this death practice group in December is going to be the 7th one out of the so far planned 13 months. And I'm using it as an experiment to listen as I go. And new things are coming from it, right? So I have to titrate those new things so that I don't get burnt out, because I do have a disease to manage. But here's one new thing that's come out of it. So Starting in January, I think the week before the official new class will be a new session. It will be called like the Night Garden, and it will be like, so the one in January will be called the Januarium, and the one in February will be called the Februarium, and the one in March will be called the Marchium. And I'm going to do that every month. And it will be a 2-hour session instead of the regular 4-hour session. And it will be donation-based. And it will only be available for registration. You'll still have to register even though it's donation-based through Ticket Tailor, same thing. But it'll be available and open to anyone who has either taken a previous death practice group or bought a recording. So it's very open, but it's not open to anyone. It's not for new people. It's not for new people. It's for people who have already listened to a session, whether that's all the sessions or one of the sessions, whether that's live or recorded, it doesn't really matter. Because I have a list of all these people. So I have a spreadsheet with all the names that people who have ordered, right? And it'll be by donation again. And here's what it'll be. It'll be a place where you can come, and for 2 hours we can do a little practice. Like I'll do like a little guided meditation at the beginning. But then for the rest of the time, it will be like troubleshooting your practice, and it'll be very direct. So we don't have a lot of time, so I won't waste any time. So if you come and you're like, oh, I've been playing around with this, and this seems to be happening and I don't like it, I will just go through practices with you. But they will be very fast, and they won't be like a whole set. It's not like an hour-long therapy session for one person. It's a group system, it's a group model, and you'll share and I will help you practice in real time for a few minutes. And then you'll take notes and you'll go off and practice more. But this will be monthly, this will be by donation, this will be for anyone who has taken a live class and or bought a recording. And you have to still be pretty mature, because I'm not going to baby you when you ask the question, right? Like, the thing about the death practice group, and I think you're understanding it, hopefully, if you're coming to the class. If you're not, you probably don't understand what I'm talking about. But the point is that in any other situation involving healing, trauma, somatics, people are paying to be babied and to be taken care of in this really pathetic way, because they think that they need that kind of babying in order to heal. And the death practice group is different. The death practice group is where the truth sets you free. The truth just hits you, and you realize your responsibility in the play of that truth hitting you, and what you have to do in your own life to become the kind of person who could be a little more like Teflon, but not nihilistic, but a little more like things don't stick. And that includes unsticking a lot of this bullshit from your life. Unsticking your identities, unsticking your ideas about your life and your trauma, and blah, blah, blah. Unsticking. Saying, well, what if I could just not tell this story anymore, right? So it is a kind of channeling, although I'm not telling you who I'm fucking channeling, because I don't really care. Because I'm not trying to get to this like, oh, we're doing mediumship. You know, we're all fucking doing mediumship all the time, don't you know? We're all dreaming all the fucking time. We're very porous. The world is bleeding through itself. There's no specials. There's no like, well, this person's super special because they can listen to Mary Magdalene. It's like, what are you fucking talking about? Garbage thinking. No, I'm channeling the Pleiadian star beings. Yeah, sure the fuck you are. Whatever, I don't care. Why can't you channel the grass? You know, it's all this specialness. So when you come to the Januarium, the Februarium, we'll do a little night practice. We'll do a little death practice. We'll do a little night gardening, if you will. We'll tend to the garden of our souls a little bit in a dreamlike, creative way, playfully. And then when you have a troubleshoot, you'll raise your hand, and then I'll just answer you and lead you through some stuff. I'll say, okay, do this. Why don't you do that? What's happening now? And I'll lead you through a little practice, but it'll be very quick because a lot of people think this stuff has to be forever. It's not really true. It takes the time it takes, but you don't have to constantly postpone your life. You just need to learn how to play the ball where it lands. And most people don't have the setup to do that. They don't have the modeling, the community, the language, the internal dynamics. And I need to help people have that so that we can play more in all the ways that we can play. So that's the announcement. There'll be an extra class starting in January, and then of course the new stuff, the new content will still be in the regularly scheduled monthly deaf practice groups where we go through new content, new lectures. I make new slides and have new content, and that'll be still the 3 or 4 hour period. Let's see if there's anything else. I don't think there's anything else right now. There will definitely be more announcements. Oh, there is something. So I think we can announce this. So in January, Larissa and I will do a keynote. Not a keynote. It's like we'll do a lecture workshop and a practice workshop for the Rewilding Conference, which you can buy tickets for now. Rewilding is a local Portland institution run by Peter Michael Bauer and his associates, and it's super cool. And we will be doing some combo. Like on Saturday, we'll do a presentation, and on Sunday, we will do a practice lecture, like a practice thing. But it'll all be online because they're doing all their stuff online. And then I think maybe the week or two after that Rewilding Conference, which I think is on January 21st or something like that, 21st, 22nd, 23rd-ish kind of thing. We'll do a in-person rhizomatic choir, but that still has to be hammered out, the details. But it'll be an in-person rhizomatic choir praxis in Portland, so that'll be an in-person thing people can come to that's not online, and that'll be at the end of January. And then we have a bunch more things that we're cooking up for the end of the winter and the spring, and we're not ready to announce any of that yet, but those are the things that I can announce. And so the death practice group is going to keep going. The playground is keeping going. Larissa has their own stuff. Check the website, or if you're on the Patreon, all the announcements are both there. There's a quiet period, for the holidays. I think that's very useful to do. So, hopefully I'll see some of you at Wednesday's practice group. If not, it's totally fine. Who cares? Wednesday the 14th of December, you can buy tickets through the link in the bio, or go to the website animistarts.art and find the death practice group drop down and look at the info. And if you can do that same thing if you want to buy recordings of past events. So right now there's six recordings. You can purchase the recordings and just see what I'm talking about. All right. I hope that you enjoy the day wherever you are. Thanks so much. I'll put this video up on Instagram and on YouTube, and I'll see you when I see you. Blessings to all beings. Thanks, everyone.